Mistakenly, some people refer to the Church of England as a Protestant church. We refer to ourselves as Catholic and Reformed.
From an Anglican perspective, what is the story of the Reformation? How do you guys view the Reformation?
What many would call the Anglo-Catholic tradition. Within our tradition, we generally talk about the Reformation as a bad thing.
What are your thoughts on the new change with the Archbishop?
I can't in conscience accept the sacramental ministry of female priests and bishops. Bishop Sarah Mullally, from what I understand, she's been very supportive of traditionalists in the Church of England. Having a devotion to Mary and being Christian is not an option. It is an integral part of being a Christian and living out our faith. I'd like to see the Church of England as a whole make that journey towards unity with the Roman Catholic Church. Certainly at the moment that seems insurmountable. Here we also pray for the Holy Father, recognising the successor to St. Peter.
What prevents right now the Anglo-Catholic tradition from being in full or partial communion with Rome?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think partly it is the
Father Ben, from your perspective, what is the story of Walsingham and why is this place such a blessing to people?
So the story goes back to 1061. That's when the vision happened of Our Lady appearing to Lady Rocheldis, who was the Lady of the Manor. There wasn't much here at all at that time in Walsingham. And she asked her to build a copy of the Holy House of Nazareth. So it's the house where the Annunciation took place, the house where the Holy Family lived. And she did that with a bit of difficulty, helped by angels, and the copy of the Holy House was made. Of course, not the one we've got here now, but across the road in what became an abbey. And a huge place of pilgrimage, really, really significant, one of the premier shrines of Europe. Up until Henry VIII, all our monarchs came on pilgrimage here. And sadly, during Henry VIII's reign, the warrant was signed to destroy the abbey. And so the Holy House was destroyed and the abbey was destroyed. And then just over 100 years ago, Father Hope Patton, who was the vicar here of Walsingham, wanted to re-establish pilgrimage. He had a new image made. We don't know if the image of Our Lady of Walsingham is exactly right. What we had to go on, or what he had to go on, was actually the seal which signed the warrant for the destruction of the abbey.
When you say the image, is it the image of the crown and the baby?
Indeed,
the green stone?
Yeah. It's not that detailed, but it gives a sort of a rough idea.
Yeah.
And he had that image made, and that went into the parish church. And the Bishop of Norwich was very unhappy about the fact that he had this new image of Our Lady of Walsingham, and said it wasn't to remain in the parish church. So Father Patton then built the Shrine Church, which we've got just a few yards from my study here. And the image was translated in 1931. So we're coming up soon for the centenary of that. And from very modest beginnings, he got pilgrimage going again. And here in this complex, what's grown up around the Shrine Church is accommodation and catering and things, so that we can actually host pilgrims residentially. And I think what makes it so special is just the fact it's a holy place. This is a place where thousands, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims have come on pilgrimage, and I think you can always tell somewhere which has been prayed in a lot, and where those feet have trodden.
I said that to her yesterday. Like, there's something different about this place, and you tread on it. It feels
absolutely. You're in a holy place, and I think then also that sense of encounter, that in coming to this replica of the Holy House, in coming to the image of Our Lady of Walsingham, one is given a special opportunity to deepen one's understanding of what went on in that encounter between the angel Gabriel and Our Lady. It's very much a place where we renew ourselves in the message of the Annunciation, and through that try to model our lives more faithfully to the model that Mary gives us, a model of prayer, a model of obedience, a model of trust in God. and also here we have particular liturgies which people come for. So like many shrines, it's known as a place of healing. So one of the things pilgrims come to is receive the water from the holy well. We have processions, obviously celebrate Mass regularly, and also shrine prayers when we recite the Rosary each day, and intersperse into that intentions of our pilgrims. So each mystery is offered for particular intentions. And that well, interestingly, does bring us back to sort of the original shrine, because when Father Hope Paton built this church, as they were preparing the foundations, they discovered that one of the medieval wells had actually been concealed at the time of destruction. So once they pulled out all the sort of Tudor shoes and ironmongery and pots and vessels and things, they found the water running clear. So we do still very much have that close link to our original pilgrims, and people come and receive the water in the rite of sprinkling. They come to take that water away with them, and that's a really important part of coming here on pilgrimage.
You spoke about Henry VIII, and that obviously begs the question of the Reformation. So I hear the Reformation story quite a lot from my fellow Catholics. And if you Google the Reformation, it's just, Henry VIII wanted a divorce. So there's the Reformation. So, but from an Anglican perspective, what is the story of the Reformation? How do you guys view the Reformation? So
it'll depend who you speak to within the Church of England. And of course, mistakenly, some people refer to the Church of England as a Protestant church, whereas actually our documents, our formularies, are very careful to refer to us as, we refer to ourselves as Catholic and Reformed. And the shrine is very much within what many would call the Anglo-Catholic tradition. And within our tradition, we generally talk about the Reformation as a bad thing. If you read the text of the Pilgrim hymn, you'll get to the point where Henry VIII is mentioned, and that's the low point for the shrine.
Tell me about
that. And the organist goes into minor key to accompany those verses. What is really crucial is despite the fact there's obviously a huge amount of change to the church in this country, and a lot of it not very good change, is that we maintain the threefold order of deacon, priest and bishop. And so although obviously in ecumenical dialogue there are nuances around this and differences of opinion, for us as members of the Church of England, we maintain that apostolic link has been maintained. And hence we talk about the priesthood and about the sacraments here. And I think in some ways the Church of England did slightly lose its way. And what we saw then in the 19th century was the Oxford movement. And the Oxford movement was an effort to essentially reclaim the Catholic identity of the Church of England. And that's when we see lots of Victorian churches being built, which, just through their very architecture, make a statement. If you go to somewhere like my former parish church, where I was parish priest, St Bartholomew's, Brighton, you see the absolute centrality of the altar. The whole way the building is constructed is orientated towards celebrating the Mass. And that work sort of continues into the 20th century. I think part of what Father Paton was doing here is partly an outworking of the Oxford movement and the work that brought about. You've got other people like Gabriel Hebert who kind of introduced the parish communion movement. So I don't know if this is quite accurate to say. I think it is that as a result of that, most parish churches in the Church of England now, their principal liturgy on a Sunday morning is a celebration of the Mass, even if they might call it the Eucharist or Holy Communion or whatever. So the Church of England's been on a big journey since Henry VIII caused that schism.
Institutionally, you would still be under the Church of England.
So yes, very much institutionally under the Church of England. Here we have at the shrine a slightly complex relationship because we're also an independent charity, and we're under the governance of the Guardians of the Holy House, which Father Patton set up. But we do have I was licensed by the Bishop of Norwich. Sacramentally here, we look to the Bishop of Richborough, who's what's called the Provincial Episcopal Visitor, to this part of the country. But also, whilst we have those Church of England structures of understanding authority and governance and things, here we also pray for the Holy Father, recognising that the See of Peter, the successor to St. Peter, is a central figure in Christendom, and we pray and hope for Christian unity, and would recognise that.
It's a good thing you touched on that, because that was going to be my next question, which is if you ever saw a reunion of, I don't know if it's too late for an Anglican reunion as a whole, but to be more specific, an Anglo-Catholic reunion, what would that look like from an Anglo-Catholic perspective, for you at least?
Again, yeah. So again, opinions would differ a lot here, and of course, so for some people used to be within the Church of England, they would say that sense of how that unity can look has already happened in the establishment of the Ordinariate under the patronage of Our Lady of Walsingham. I think my view has always been partly when I was brought up being asleep in my Moses basket in the organ loft at my parish church, and having been completely brought up and nurtured by the Church of England, I've always come to take the view I'd like to see the Church of England as a whole sort of make that journey towards unity with the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I'm not stupid. I think there are a huge number of obstacles in the way, and certainly at the moment that seems insurmountable. But it doesn't stop me hoping and praying that perhaps one day we can find a way for that to happen.
What are your thoughts on the new change with the Archbishop right now? I know you would say it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, well, I can give you my personal view. So I stand within what some people call the traditionalist sort of wing of the Church of England. So I can't in conscience accept the sacramental ministry of female priests and bishops, nor indeed the sacramental ministry of men who've been ordained by women bishops. It all gets quite complicated now since we've had women bishops since 2014. But when that decision was made by the Church of England, structures were put in place which led to a slight reworking of structures that existed before in terms of how parishes who couldn't accept the ministry of female priests worked. So we still have as I've already mentioned, the Provincial Episcopal Visitors who look after those parishes. And we also had the 5 guiding principles introduced. And it seems to me that has by and large worked very well. And so actually the natural progression, as we always knew would happen, that someday there would be a female Archbishop of Canterbury. In a sense, the structures already provide for that. So it's not something that particularly alarms me. And indeed, in the sort of personal nature of the fact of the particular person who's been appointed, Bishop Sarah Mullally, she is someone who has a very good track record of promoting the 5 guiding principles, of seeking mutual flourishing within her own diocese, currently London. There's the Bishop of Fulham, who looks after the traditionalist parishes. And from what I understand, they've had a very good relationship, and she's been very supportive of those parishes. So I've every reason to hope that she'll continue to be supportive of traditionalists in the Church of England.
There's a lot of what we would call evangelicals or Protestant Christians across the world that don't really have a devotion to Mary. Why should Christians care about Mary?
Yeah, so my starting point is always actually that having a devotion to Mary and being Christian, it's not an option. A devotion to Mary, it is an integral part of being a Christian and living out our faith. And yes, of course, we never wish to take away the understanding that the Son of God is that Jesus Christ is our mediator and our Redeemer. And of course, and I won't get into this because I haven't read the document, but I know Pope Leo's had something to say about some of the theology just needing to be carefully understood around in terms of Mariology. He was
against a few words like co-redemptrix.
Indeed. Yeah. But I think, it's if I may sort of compare it to something like within the Church of England, a bit like confession. Using the sacrament of reconciliation isn't something that everyone does in the Church of England, and we don't say you have to in the Church of England. But I kind of I always think, but why wouldn't you? This is something that God's given us, a way to encounter and to receive His grace. And similarly with Mary, your devotion to Mary isn't taking anything away from our Lord and our devotion to Him. Indeed, devotion to Mary only leads us to Him, and the role she's been given, not just as Mother of Jesus, but as Mother of the Church. This is given by God, and so our understanding of the Church, both on earth and in heaven, is intimately bound up with Our Lady. So I just think one can't really separate and think, oh no, that's not for me. It only adds to our faith and to the life of the Church. So I struggle to understand why people might
I think that it primarily comes because of theological interpretation of Scripture.
Yeah, I think there are a number of reasons why people might try and sort of argue that this isn't for me. But also more broadly, I suppose it feels that spectrum of all the saints, again, all the saints just add richness to our life as Christians and to our understanding of the Church. And these friends we're given, the cloud of witnesses. It can only ever be something positive in my experience that we have these relationships with Our Lady and with the saints.
Yeah. What is your story, Father? How did you end up becoming a priest?
Well, so for me, it was a bit of a surprise when I first began to think about it. I've got friends who used to preach to their teddy bears and knew as when they're very, very young that this was something God was calling them to do.
Were you?
I wasn't
that
doing
endeavor.
That. And I always went to church. Always took my faith seriously growing up. And as a little boy, I was a chorister. So I was in church every day of the week, almost. Then at university, I was reading music. And to be honest, I didn't know what I was going to do after university. I read music because I was told at school, if you don't know what you want to do, then just do something you'll enjoy at university. And I sang in the cathedral choir there in Durham. And it was actually having my house blessed one evening when I moved out of university accommodation at the end of my first year. And one of the priests who was there told me, he said, has it occurred to you yet that you're clearly going to be a priest? And I just thought, this seems a bit left of centre. And the next day I spoke with the other priest who'd been at the house blessing, and I said, Father Stephen told me that he thinks I'm going to be a priest. And this priest I was speaking with immediately said, why don't I put the kettle on? And began to talk to me about it. And so that was just that's how the seed was sown. And from there, just the more I prayed about it, talked about it, thought about it, it was a vocation which just sort of grew.
Were you always drawn to the Anglo-Catholic tradition, or did you start elsewhere and then come here?
No. As a very little boy, we went to an Anglo-Catholic church, my family in London. And then from the age of 7, I was away at boarding school, and initially that was being a chorister at King's College, Cambridge, where I guess I'd sort of described the religion as sort of maybe sunny side of centre. And and then sort of in teenage years through school chaplaincy again, going to chapel several times a week. So a lot of my sort of childhood and teenage years, I wouldn't say were Anglo-Catholic, although when I was at secondary school, when I started, it was one of the privileges of being in the chapel choir was that we didn't have to go to weekday chapel. We only had to go to chapel on a Sunday, which we all thought was wonderful. And then that was taken away, and they said, no, you're now going to have to go to chapel 2 days a week. And we had, at that time, we had the option, you could either go upstairs to the main chapel for a kind of songs of praise kind of thing, or you could go to the crypt chapel for Mass. And I thought, well, if I'm going to start going to chapel more regularly, I'll go to Mass, I think. So again, I think, there were seeds of something, but it wasn't really until after university that I really sort of began to encounter the sort of Catholic tradition as I know it now.
What prevents right now the Anglo-Catholic tradition from being in, let's say, full or partial communion with Rome? What do you think prevents it right now? Is it the institutional boundaries, or is it the theological difference? Or
I think it's a mixture of things. I think partly it is the institutional boundaries. Partly, as I was saying, although we're a tradition within the Church of England, we are very much part of the Church of England, and obviously there is a way through for people to enter full communion with the Roman Catholic Church, either simply by being received just kind of normally, as it were, or through the ordinariate. I'm not suggesting I'd want to do this, but I think what's different about the Church of England, perhaps from some other Anglican churches, is that one can't just sort of take the church and and everything with you. There's some things tied up with that, but also I think, again, coming back to what I said earlier, that I think we'd also understand is actually if there was to be union between the two churches, it's not about union between purely Anglo-Catholics and the Church of Rome, but actually seeing the Church of England as a whole come into union, which, despite the fact we know that's, we're far off that at the moment.
What would you like to see more of in the world?
Gosh, big question. Well, I suppose, speaking generally in the world, see more peace and reconciliation, see fewer wars. Well, indeed, I suppose if there's a complete wish list, to see no wars, and to see any forms of poverty and exploitation vanished. I think, essentially for me, what I look to in kind of the world that could be, the world that I think God desires us to be, is one in which the dignity of every human being is recognised and valued, because that's a dignity which has been bestowed upon them by God, and it's for us to try and see the world through God's eyes, and to see Christ present in every person we meet.
Thank you for your time, Father.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you.